Welcome, I'm Ernie Goss, Professor of Economics, McAllister Chair here at Creighton University in beautiful downtown Omaha, Nebraska, on the first business day of March, as I'm always here the first business day of each month, to report on the Mid-American economy. That's the Mid-American economy for February. And that's the 9-state economy stretching from North Dakota and Minnesota in the north, right down the middle of the country to Oklahoma and Arkansas in the south. And this is a leading economic indicator. Now, it hasn't been doing a very good job in terms of leading lately. In other words, our number has not been good, and the economy has been somewhat better, although the economy is still limping along, the U.S. economy and the regional economy. I'll talk about that momentarily, in fact, right now. For the first time since July, the overall index is above growth neutral. Now it was 50.8, let me just say that. I'm sorry, 50.5, let me get it quite more accurate there. The index was 50.5, up from 48.3 in January. So that's moving in the right direction, and I'll call it stabilizing. The economy is stabilizing. That's the manufacturing sector, and I expect the overall economy for the 9 states, now overall when you put it all together, to move positively, not as positive as we'd like to see. And I'll talk about the individual states, Oklahoma and North Dakota particularly. North Dakota's in a recession. Oklahoma growth is much slower because of energy. Of course, oil prices are remaining at $30 a barrel or around there. And this is the second straight increase that we've recorded. Now here you'll see the chart that I'm bringing up. And this is the chart sent from January of 2015 to February of 2016. And there you see in a beautiful Creighton blue there, the index is bouncing up there. And that looks like a pretty good jump and looks like good news, but you'll see the index is still hovering around 50, growth neutral 50. And you see in red, the U.S. number, and the number will be released later on this morning. That's the national number. I expect it to bounce a little bit higher, but still the manufacturing sector in the regional, this Mid-America region, and the U.S. still not showing the growth that we need to see. Now we ask about a rate hike from the Federal Reserve and how that would affect the businesses. 25.4, that's a little more than a fourth of businesses said a March Federal Reserve rate hike would negatively affect their business. Now that's a concern, since I think we may get a rate hike, 60% probability of a rate hike in March. Now the March 15th and 16th, when the Federal Reserve Open Market Committee meets. We ask about the biggest threat for 2016. What was it? And about 39.7% indicated that it was a weak U.S. economy, and even potentially a recession in the U.S. I don't think we're going to see that, but we'll talk about that momentarily. 17.5% indicated that finding and hiring qualified workers remains an issue. Now that's qualified workers. That would be skilled workers that fit the job that's being advertised for or needed, where we need a worker. That's a concern, as we're just not seeing enough skill training going on out there, in my judgment. The employment index fell to 44.4 from January's 49.3. Inflationary pressures ticked up very slightly to 52.5, not seeing as much inflation as one might expect. Now, what do we watch for? Now, what are the indicators for you and for me and other economists, policymakers to keep an eye on? It'll be the February jobs report, which comes out this Friday. That'll be March 4th. We need to see a number above 150,000. That would be job growth of 150,000. I think we probably will see it on Friday. Keep an eye on the core CPI, and that's the number for January, and that'll be released on the 19th of February. Keep an eye on the yield on the 10-year and the yield on the 2-year. Now we call that, it's often called the yield curve, and when that flattens, when the gap closes, that's a real issue. It's about 1%. In other words, the 10-year is about 1% above. The 2-year, that's a pretty good level. If it comes down, that's something you need to keep an eye on. Now, what are the risks? What are the risks going forward? Right now, the chief among them is the value of the dollar. If we see a strong dollar, that makes our goods less competitively priced abroad. That's a real risk factor for the economy, and if we should see it bounce higher. Of course, what would cause it to bounce higher? Federal Reserve rate hike on the March 15th and 16th, which is another risk factor. And will they do it? I think there's a 60% likelihood. Now that's, my estimate is much higher than the market is saying right now, but I think there is a 60% chance. What will push them that way? The core CPI moving stronger. And that, as I said, that's something to keep an eye on. And then what the language surrounding that meeting, that's the Open Market Committee meeting on the 15th and 16th, what Janet Yellen says, listen to it, because if she sounds aggressive in terms of maybe there's another rate hike coming forward, that's a risk factor. And as I said, the flattening, what I'll call the flattening of the yield curve, if the 2-year goes up and the 10-year remains about where it is, that's a risk factor. Well, that's it, folks. Thanks for tuning in with me here on the first business day of March, reporting on the economy, the Mid-America economy for the month of February. It was a better report. Things are looking better, and so I won't say I'm pumped up, but I'm feeling a little better about the economy, and that's a good thing. Until we meet again, that would be on April the 1st, first business day of April, reporting on the March survey results. Until we meet then, may your economic cup runneth over.